How can you tell real patterns from imagined ones? Have you ever looked at a cloud and thought it looked like a dragon or a face? That's pareidolia at work, a fascinating quirk of how our minds see patterns where none really exist. Our brains are wired to find meaning in chaos, which is why we often see faces in inanimate objects or shapes in random images. But how do you know if what you're seeing is a real pattern or just your imagination playing tricks? That's the big question. The first thing to consider is the context. Real patterns tend to be consistent and appear in similar situations. For example, if you notice a pattern in data that repeats over time or in different samples, it's likely genuine. Imagined patterns, on the other hand, often seem random and lack coherence when you look at them more closely. Think about a random scribble that suddenly looks like a face. If you keep examining it and it still resembles a face, it might be a true pattern. If it disappears or looks different each time, it's probably just your mind filling in gaps. Next, look at the likelihood of the pattern occurring naturally. Genuine patterns usually follow some kind of rule or cause. For example, a pattern in a series of numbers that increases by a set amount is more likely to be real. Imagined patterns often appear because of chance, like seeing a shape in a cloud that's just a random formation. Using statistical tools can help here. If a pattern is statistically significant, it's more likely to be real. Verification is also key. If you can observe the same pattern repeatedly under different conditions, it's probably real. For example, if you see a face in a shadow and then see the same face in similar shadows later, that's a good sign. If the pattern only appears once or in a specific situation, it might be a mental illusion. Understanding your own mind helps too. Some people are more prone to pareidolia because of how their brains process visual information. Being aware of this can help you question whether what you see is real or just a mental shortcut. Recognizing biases like apophenia, the tendency to see connections between unrelated things, can help you stay critical. In experiments with strange images, even animals like primates can sometimes recognize faces, but humans tend to anthropomorphize objects more often. Brain scans show that the same neural networks activate when we see real faces and when we see faces in objects or clouds. This suggests our brains treat imagined patterns similarly to real ones, which is why it can be tricky to tell the difference. In practical terms, if you want to tell real patterns from imagined ones, check if they're consistent, statistically significant, and repeatable. Be aware of your own tendencies to see connections and question whether the pattern makes sense in a larger context. Remember, our minds are amazing at finding meaning, but sometimes that means we see things that aren't really there. Recognizing this can help you better understand how perception works and appreciate the quirks of your own mind.